All right. So we've got Hitomi and Chelsea and Sean, and of course, Edwards from the staff. And Denise. Denise has joined us. So everybody, welcome to this session. And this session is called Economics for Everyone. Okay. Now, this name, Economics for Everyone, did not start with me. It actually started with Jim Stanford. How many of you are familiar with Jim Stanford? You could just let me know in the chat feature. Jim Stanford is an economist with the unions in the east coast of Canada. That's him. And he wrote a book in 2008, Economics for Everyone. And what his objective in that book was to cut through all the technical mumbo jumbo, all the jargon and everything, so that a common layperson could understand how you understand the economy, what's there in the textbooks. So Jim went ahead and he created a course called Economics for Everyone, How to Cut Through the Jargon. It's free. His videos are freely accessible. This is the website, Center for Future Work. You are free to go there and watch his videos. Now, each of his videos is 1 hour long. Okay. And however, the approach I'm taking is different from his. I use a lot of pictures and I use a lot of videos when I basically engage with people on economics. So my first question, let's start this now. My first question is, look at this meme over there. And how many of you are familiar with Galen Weston Jr.? No. Let's see who else is here. We've got Denise and Chelsea and Hitomi. How many of you are familiar with them? You can feel free to engage with me. You can type in the chat feature, or if you want to share your screen, I should be able to allow that as well. Any ideas? Any guesses? Okay, so he is the CEO of Loblaws. At least he was a CEO for quite some time. And I believe that this over here, the guy with the specs here, that's Galen Weston Jr. He owns Superstore. He owns TNT and all the supply chains which are connected with it. Now, when the pandemic hit us in March 2020, in that whole year, the net worth of Loblaws, the parent company for Superstore and for TNT and whatnot, it increased by $1.6 billion. This is a time when people were losing jobs left, right, and center. This is a time when the average Canadian was dependent on your CERB payments. See, they were dependent on the CERB payments. But during that time, the VP Finance, the VP Marketing, the Director of Sales, and all these top-notch job posts, they got bonuses worth $19.4 million. And how many of you remember the hero pay that Loblaws came up with during the pandemic? Anybody remembers how much it was for per hour? Okay. The hero pay was basically $2 per hour. That was what was given to the grocery workers and the cashiers and the clerks for putting themselves in harm's way during the pandemic. And even this $2 per hour was given to them for basically 2 or 3 months max. It was then stopped afterwards. That's exactly what happened during the pandemic. So you see the last picture over there, the working class people, they got nothing for putting in all the effort, for making sure the groceries were shelved, everything was there. They came into contact with the virus. Now remember, this is a time when the virus is spreading, there is no vaccine. And you watch news, people are dying in Italy, in Spain, in UK, in New York. It's a very scary time. And during that time, some people made millions and billions, and others left with what I like to call peanuts. Okay, so that's the starting point. And then if you really wanted to be serious, and if you really wanted to understand what the hell is happening in this economy, how do I make sense of this inequality that is happening, then some people say, all right, I'm going to take a class in economics and try to figure out what the hell is happening to the economy all around me. So you brave up and you join a class at MacEwan or U of A or Concordia, and you go back, or Nate, you go back to school, and when you open your textbook, you are basically approached with technical jargon. You are basically shown graphs, one graph after another, one mathematical equation after another. And this is, many of you would be familiar with this graph. For those of you who have taken, maybe even long back, the basic demand and supply graph. And the intersection point over here between the demand and the supply curve. So this is your demand, in the red line. The blue line is your supply curve. The intersection point is referred to as the equilibrium point. And at the equilibrium point, they basically say that MPL is equal to W. Now, MPL, I'm not going to go into the technical details, the marginal product of labor. It basically stands for what is your contribution to the business. So if you're working for a bakery, for instance, and you basically bake 20 loaves of bread, and each loaf of bread sells for $4 each, then your contribution basically is $80, right? And at the equilibrium point, what is mentioned is that your contribution is equal to your wage. Okay, and wage is basically the compensation. I'm just typing over here in the chat feature. You can follow the chat over here, and your wage is basically a compensation, right? So essentially, then what's happening over here through this graph, the message that is being sent to you is that your contribution, okay, is exactly equal to your compensation. So and the implication then is, the harder you work, the more money you will make. That is the implication of this graph. All right. Now, how many of you buy this? How many of you really buy this graph over here, that that your compensation is equal to your contribution, right? It doesn't make sense. Okay. And what's happened to my picture over here? Just, I can't seem to find the chat. Okay. Just give me a second. Session and then chat. Yes. Okay. So Sean went off screen. Okay. Close moderation panel. Let me know if you need to come back again, and I can help you out with that. Anyways, so your contribution is equal to your compensation. Okay. It means the more you work, the harder you work, the more income you're going to make. Now, how many of you buy this? If you really, really think about it, there are many, many people in the world who work incredibly hard. All right. No, exactly. Not at all. It feeds the myth of meritocracy. Absolutely right. And how many of you have read this book by Michael Sandel? Actually, Chelsea, you've really hit the nail on the head. That's the title of his book, Michael Sandel's book, The Myth of Meritocracy. It doesn't make sense, right? But that's what your exactly what your Econ 101 teaches you when you go back to school. Okay? So we need to challenge this. We need to challenge this graph, because right now what's happening is economic has become a very elitist subject. It is a subject which basically envelops everything in mathematical jargon, and it basically reduces democratic participation from the public. So only a select few who are good with mathematics, they are allowed to speak. Okay. So they deliberately do that so that they can continue to charge high consulting fees. All right. And these people have made a career out of all of this, based on all this technical jargon. So we're going to change the narrative over here. And I'm going to show you, and we're going to change the narrative. And the narrative basically is increasingly being challenged. This is an incredibly amazing book The Age of Increasing Inequality, written by Lars Osberg, Professor Emeritus. I think it's Carlton, I'm not sure on that though. His viewpoint, his argument, carefully researched, basically shows us that the income of the middle class in Canada has stagnated over time, and that your compensation has not kept up with your contribution. So if you contributed $80 worth of bread to a bakery, you only got $15 worth in minimum wage. So the huge gap between 80 and 15, that was basically your contribution that you contributed towards the business. It did not come to you. It was appropriated by the corporation, by the business. Okay, so labor productivity has incredibly gone up, but the wage has not kept up. The wage has not grown as much with it. Now, what does Lars Osberg say? Lars Osberg says that all of this income is being taken away by the top 1%. Okay, and the top 1%, what they do is they fund think tanks. I believe many people here would be familiar with the Fraser Institute, right? And what is the narrative which is projected? Yeah, absolutely, Sean. What is the narrative which is projected by the Fraser Institute? Right? Low taxes. Okay, and whenever they say low taxes, just keep in mind what they're basically saying is low education and low. Just excuse my spelling, okay? I can't type right now properly. So when they say low taxes, what they're basically promoting is low education and low healthcare, because your budget is basically this. I'm going to write the equation for you: T minus G. T stands for taxes, G stands for government spending. So when you bring down T, what you're basically saying, you're bringing down G, government spending. And the two major sources of government spending are healthcare and education. So they're not going to openly say, we want the education expenditures to go down, or we want the healthcare expenditures to go down. They're basically saying, bring the taxes down. That's what they're saying. But that's exactly what they're saying. Bring down the education expenditure. Why? Because the top 1%, the elite classes, they do not want to fund public education. Why is that the case? Because in public education, the kids of the working class people go. The elite can afford to send their kids to private preparatory schools with all the privileges and perks, right? So your kids are essentially competition for the kids of the elite class. So they don't want that competition for them. That's why they are not interested in funding public education. Now, the other thing that Lars Osberg raises in this book is that this exacerbates inequality, right? The pandemic exacerbated inequality. Inequality was already there, and the pandemic made it worse. Okay, so what happens then is, what does all of this lead towards is political power. So all the top 1% can fund the political campaigns of the MLAs and the MPs, and they can basically ask the politicians that I scratched your back, you scratch my back, and you pass the legislation which works in the interests of my business. So that's where political power comes from, through campaign fundings. Number two, financial crisis. Now, many of you would be familiar with the financial crisis of 2008, right? Why did that arise? One of the reasons behind that is the rich people have too much cash left with them, and they play games in the stock market. Okay, so if we allow inequality to fester, if we allow the concentration of money, hoarding of money that way, that leads to a financial crisis again and again and again. That's a second problem with hoarding of money, with inequality. Third thing, all of this leads also to unhappiness in the economy, in the society, this inequality that has risen in Canada. How? So when you look at Instagram, when you look at the lives of the rich people, and they're basically living a life of luxury. And here we have working class people who are finding it incredibly hard. They work 2 jobs, they work 3 jobs, and they still can't put food on the table. or they can't pay the rent, or they have to cut corners here or there. Okay, happiness levels go down. Okay, because you find that some people have it all, whereas others, they're eking out on a bare subsistence. Okay, number four, economic stability. The economic stress goes up, where even if you have a job, you're always on your toes. Who knows, I'm going to lose this job. And then if you lose your job, there's only one place you can go. You go down, and you go down to what I like to call a muck job. Okay, all these low paying service jobs, that's where people who actually used to have middle class jobs, if they lose jobs, they come down over there. Because since 2008, a vast majority of the jobs which have been created in Canada have been in that service low paying sector. Okay, and so that adds to the stress levels of the middle working class people in Canada as well. Then, of course, social problems, crimes, mental health issues, addiction issues, they're all associated with inequality. And finally, populism. So when people experience or people feel perceived grievance, let me write this. When people have perceived grievances because they've lost their jobs because of free trade agreements, or they've lost their jobs because of hyper globalization, because of outsourcing of jobs and whatnot, then that leads to populism. That leads to the rise of far right groups in society, much more in the United States, but also to consider. Exactly, absolutely right, Sean. That's exactly how Donald Trump came to power. And this is a universal phenomenon. It's not restricted to US or Canada. You could take a look at India. Modi, the BJP, the Modi government came into power over there. Again, many working class people, they don't have proper jobs. The textile industry in Mumbai completely decimated. And so these people who have nothing better to do they have degrees, education, they end up joining fascist far right movements. And they pick up a minority, whether it's the Hispanics in the US, whether it's the Muslim community in India, whoever it is, the Sikh people, whoever it is, they get targeted. So inequality is problematic. In fact, I would say it's the second biggest issue we face in society today after the existential threat of climate change. So it has to be taken very, very seriously. So let's continue then. Let's start with this. All right, this is question time, and people feel free to engage with me. You can write in the chat feature. What do you see in this picture? First of all, where is this picture from? This is your chance to interact. Snow White, absolutely right. This is Snow White. Now, these are the seven dwarfs, right? Now, where do the dwarfs work? You let me know. Where do the seven dwarfs work? How do I give you attendee engagement? How do I? Yes. All right. I got you, Sean. I added you. I hope you can. So Hitomi, in a mine. That's absolutely right, Hitoma. And what are they mining?
I don't know what the
Mining ore. Okay, it's not ore. It's actually. Let me write this for you. Okay, what's happening here? Okay, apply selection. Okay, let me write this for you. They're actually mining diamonds and rubies and gems. That's what they're doing. Now, next question for everyone. Where do they live? Where do they live? That's a question. I hope people have seen this in their childhood, right? No? So they live in a cottage far, far away, right? And do each of them have a separate cottage, or they all live in one huddle space?
one.
Exactly. In one huddle space. Seven people living in one huddle space, right? And they're working where? In the diamond factory. What? So my question is, and how long are they working? If you've seen these Disney animation, they're working from the morning until sunset, and at sunset they come home and they discover Snow White over there, right? And they got all get very excited. The point is, these are 7 people, okay, working in a diamond, ruby, gem factory mine, but the living conditions are abysmal. What do they have to show for themselves? Nothing, right? So keep this in mind. Okay, next picture. I'm going to do this from the with the wonderful world of Disney. Okay, who can recognize this? Where is this picture from?
Pinocchio.
Pinocchio. That is absolutely right. This is from Pinocchio. And what's happening in this picture? And the other guy, of course, is, you may or may not remember this. Uh, okay. Yeah, absolutely right, Michael. That's absolutely great. And so this is Stromboli, right? And what is Stromboli doing? He has locked up Pinocchio, right? He has locked up Pinocchio and he's making money at his expense. Pinocchio is doing all the work. Pinocchio is bringing all the gold coins, and Stromboli is basically benefiting from his labor. And Pinocchio is, this is what we would call worker, okay, worker exploitation. All right. So this means that the condition that we came across earlier in our Econ 101, that MPL was equal to W, is just BS. It doesn't work in real life, right? And so let's connect this with the real world picture. These are workers from Qatar in the Middle East. Now, many of you are familiar with the FIFA stadium and how many poor workers from Nepal and other places, Sri Lanka, the Philippines. This is how they live in the Middle East. Just like the 7 dwarfs, 6, 7 people stuck in the same room, okay, and working day in, day out, 12-hour shifts, nothing to show for themselves. Okay, so Pinocchio and Snow White. Let's give David. Let's add David as well. Okay, Pinocchio and Snow White. They basically allude to this reality out there. Okay, let's continue then. Okay, here we go. All right, now where is this from? This might be a bit difficult. This is relatively new. Anyone knows?
Is this the frog and the princess?
Oh, you remember this one. So the princess and the frog. Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, what do you see in this picture between the 2 girls?
There's a white girl in a fancy dress.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's Charlotte in the pink dress, and Tiana is in the simple green frock, right? And Charlotte is born in a world of privilege, lots and lots of toys, nice mansion, big daddy lives in a nice neighborhood, right? Whereas Tiana, she is the daughter of the seamstress or the nanny who comes to babysit Charlotte. And Tiana lives in what you would call a working class neighborhood, whatever you want to call it. Huddled up spaces, not many public amenities, and it's more communal living rather than the posh living of Charlotte. Now, this is where inequality actually begins. Let's fast forward 15, 20 years and let's see what happens to Charlotte and Tiana. Now, what do you observe here? What happens to them when they grow up? Remember, this basically is telling you that inequality starts at the primary level. It starts at the kids level. That's why access to quality daycare for parents, for working class parents, is so very, very important. And so when the Fraser Institute argues for cuts to daycare, for cuts to all of these spending that helps the working class people, in effect, what they're doing, they're exacerbating inequality. So if you look at this picture, Charlotte becomes a rich socialite over time, whereas Tiana, if you watch the Disney animation, she works she works double shifts. You can think of it as 2 jobs, And she's trying to save money to open up her own restaurant, to become an entrepreneur. But remember, Tiana over here, she cannot even apply for a bank loan to become an entrepreneur. They would discriminate against her. She does not have effective collateral to borrow from the bank. And so basically, Charlotte has enough money that she can spend in one day that would take Tiana a whole lifetime to accumulate, to even begin to think about her business. Okay. So once again, inequality is etched within at the primary level. And that's where it all starts. Okay, let's see this one. Now, where is this from?
Cinderella.
That is absolutely right. This is Cinderella. And what is happening in this scene over here? Uh, do the stepmother and the stepsisters, do they allow Cinderella to willingly try the glass slipper?
No.
No, exactly. The Grand Duke has to intervene. So this basically means the government has to intervene to create what we call a level playing field so that everybody has access to equal opportunity. So there are two concepts we need to hit over here. One is access to equal opportunity, okay, which is what the government needs to provide to make sure that worker exploitation does not happen, to make sure that every working class person gets the resources they need to be successful. But at the same time, that equal opportunity is not enough. We also need what we call equal. Let me just type it properly: equality of outcome. That is what we need. So let me just bring up this slide then. This is what we need. This is another excellent book which I would recommend people here to read if they're so interested. It came out this year, Against Inequality by Tom Mallison. Tom uses they, them pronouns, and it's one of the finest books I have come across on the subject of inequality, even stronger than Lars Osberg's book I showed earlier. Now, this book is even stronger than the work of Thomas Piketty. In fact, Thomas Piketty, some of you might be familiar with his work, the French economist. I hope he gets the Nobel Prize because he has brought up this issue at incredibly um, uh, global scale. He has basically written on this book that everybody should read this book. So, coming back to our point, in equality of opportunity is not enough. We also need some level of equality of outcome. What that means is that when Tiana and Charlotte are little girls, are little children, at that stage in time, the government needs to intervene to provide daycare, childcare, parental support, so that the parents of Tiana can afford a better quality education and other amenities for the child Tiana. Because inequality begins at that level. Okay? Because once the people grow older, it's too late. I mean, it's later. It becomes late at that time. So you need to tackle this issue in childhood, and that requires equality of outcome. Okay. The other issues that arise among from the videos, from the pictures we have seen from Disney, one is upward social mobility. Okay, if you're born in a different neighborhood, then effectively what happens is systemically we need to look at the systems. You end up systemically in a place where upward social mobility becomes incredibly hard for you. Okay, step by step you face hoops. So you go to a school and your teachers, because you went to a different school where resources were scarce, right? And so therefore they did not develop your mathematical skills or verbal skills as well as the skills of the rich posh kids. So that makes a difference. uh, all right. And then there's so therefore upward social mobility becomes difficult for people who come from disenfranchised neighborhoods. Then one of the other concepts that arises from all these clips, or from all these videos, from all these cartoon and animations, is assortative mating. Remember, Charlotte is able to think of marrying Prince Naveen, But Tiana cannot even think about it. The rich marry within the rich. So when the rich marry the rich, wealth is concentrated in in the upper echelons. So so wealth is not shared across classes then. Assortative mating also exacerbates inequality. Doctors marry doctors, dentists marry dentists. That's how it is. Okay? Another thing, of course, I think Chelsea pointed this out earlier, the myth of meritocracy. Okay? There is no such thing as deservingness. Okay? Our IQs are the way we look. In fact, this is a point which can be raised from the cartoon Cinderella as well. So when I ask people the question, does Cinderella deserve her happy ending? One of the students basically pointed out, well, she was hot, she was good looking, and that's what we call pretty privilege, right? And just like you have an IQ privilege, so much of what we earn in life is based on our looks, is based on our mental capacities, is based on our physical able-bodiedness. So all of what we make is basically based on natural endowment. We didn't do anything to deserve that, right? And yet the narrative that is basically shown by books like these, excuse me, professor, by the uh, Foundation for Economics Education, what they're basically promoting is that everybody should be uh, graded on merit. So how can we grade people on merit when it's all based on natural endowment? When we did nothing to deserve all of that. And of course, we've already talked about the government level creating level playing field. So these six concepts are very, very important in our public discussions on inequality. Okay? So moving on, I want to share another book with you. This basically is based on the top 27 experts in economics, political science, and philosophy. They came together for a conference in 2020 or 2021, and then they basically pushed back. They said, enough is enough. We need to stop the naysaying. Because anytime you ask economists about, let's do something about inequality, they'll say, no, we can't afford it. Incentives will be destroyed. If you tax the rich, they will save less, they will work less, they will vote with their feet and run away to, I don't know, avoid taxes and go to Bahamas and Luxembourg and uh, wherever else, Switzerland, and then also make the argument that we don't have enough evidence. The economic literature, all the statistical studies, they're basically conflicting, so we don't really have a proper evidence to combat inequality. And I will share this personal tidbit with you as well. Two of my own papers on tackling economic inequality were rejected from mainstream economics journal because economics, generally speaking, mainstream economics are basically in cahoots with the current neoliberal system. That's how they are. And so they don't want to listen to any other. So, despite the fact that this is why it took 27 mainstream economists to come together to push back at this issue. But even despite this book, people continue with the same route. Okay. There's another book that I want to share with you. So, what should we do? How should we tackle inequality? So, if you ask Fraser Institute, they basically will say, okay, go back to school, go get an education. But here's the thing, how many people are able to go back to school? When you're 55 years old and you have spent your life in a certain factory, and now, or you're a truck driver, and all of a sudden now they're telling you to go back to school and become an IT programmer. That doesn't that doesn't really, not everybody can become an IT programmer overnight like that. Okay, so we need to be realistic about what we are demanding of people. Okay, and then of course Daniel Susskind wrote this book, A World Without Work, where he basically talks about AI, artificial intelligence, and automation. He says eventually every one of us will be rendered obsolete by AI and automation. And at that point in time, you can't really tell people to go back to school, because even if you go back to school, the robot, the machine, the AI will do everything. that you can do. So this whole mantra of go back to school doesn't really make much sense in such a context. Okay, and then there is this whole issue about UBI. Okay, and the issue with UBI, again, universal basic income, is that if you basically remember one thing, all the billionaires like Elon Musk, like Bill Gates, they are in support of UBI. So when the billionaires are in support of UBI, then you have to really think about, why is it that they are for UBI? And remember, many of the conservative economic thinkers like Gregory Mankiw are also for UBI. Okay. Now, keep in mind one thing. For them, this is basically a cheap way out because they say you can throw some money, people will shut up, and then what will happen is they will basically get rid of all the other things like daycare, public education, welfare payments, employment insurance. They'll basically claw all of that away and then say, okay, we gave you UBI, just be happy with that. But remember one thing, UBI could be peanuts. It could be a nominal amount. Okay. So what we rather actually need, UBI may be a good thing as long as it's substantial. But what we rather need is a federal government job guarantee. Okay. Because people's self-esteem is tied with work. Work is not just a monotonous sort of thing. If as long as you're working in a place that gives you some level of satisfaction, you love what you do, that is essentially that should be given to you. Okay. So what we need is a federal job guarantee, and what we also need is to make bad jobs into good. And what I mean over here is the caregiving sector. Okay. So we are living in an economy where we basically have these jobs, which are very, very important. The caregivers take care of our grandparents in senior homes, but we pay them abysmally low. Okay. On the other hand, you have people that we can live without, the hedge funds managers. We can live without them, and they get paid really highly. So this is something really, really awry about our economy, okay? And that needs to change. So, anyways, so I'm reframing the narrative away from a UBI and towards a federal job guarantee and making bad jobs into good. That should be where we should be focused on. And that's exactly what uh, Daniel Susskind also talks about. He says, we instead of UBI, we need to talk about CBI, conditional basic income, which means even if we decide to give UBI, it should be contingent on your contribution in terms of volunteer work, in terms of giving back to the community. We need to maintain social cohesiveness as opposed to throwing away money at people and then getting rid of any sort of social collective effort. Okay. Uh, so this is where I'm heading towards right now. So education has its limits. There are some question marks in UBI. The need of the day is actually a wealth tax. With the need of the day is to remove the concentration of wealth from the top. Now, this is Larry Summers, a conservative economist at Harvard University. He says wealth taxes do not work because they failed in Europe. And these are some this, and then he also makes the argument that even a 6% wealth tax would not diminish the power of the top 1%. That's the point he makes. However, he has been challenged by Thomas Piketty. Thomas Piketty is the big name in economics today. And Thomas Piketty basically says we need a wealth tax. We need a wealth tax so that we could support universal education, so that we could guarantee employment. We need to tax the multinational companies and the billionaires. We need wealth and inheritance taxes. We need the working class people to sit on the board of directors of various corporations and companies. That is what we need. Okay. Because think about it this way as well. Even in Alberta, how many of you remember that the Alberta government created panels to study the issue of pensions. You might be familiar that Alberta wants to get out of CPP and they want to create the Alberta pension plan, right? And the question for all of you is how many middle working class people were allowed to sit on that panel, right? When Alberta did the panel on minimum wage to study the effects of a $15 minimum wage, how many middle class people were allowed to sit on the panel? And anytime you look at the panel created by the government, it's always with the economists, the consultants, the people who earn high consulting fees. They are the ones who are basically put on those discussion panels. And the average person who is affected by the minimum wage or who's affected by the pension, their voices are basically excluded from those panels. And the decisions made are imposed on the average person, on the working class person. So that's why Thomas Piketty says we need working class people on all these board of directors, on all the panels that the government basically creates. Okay, what we need, and this is, I'm going to repeat his words, we need a democratic, decentralized, ecological, and participatory socialism. That is the need of the day. It's not Chinese socialism. Chinese socialism is associated with dictatorship. We're not calling for that. We need socialism, which is democratic and participatory, where we take care not just because right now we are only focused with efficiency. What we need to focus on is equity or inequality, along with the goal of sustainability. These are the two goals we need to uphold efficient, and because we have put efficiency at the highest pedestal. Efficiency can come down a little bit. We need to raise equity and sustainability so that we could have some balance, because right now equity and sustainability are way down here and efficiency is way up here. We need the balance to come back. Okay. And so some people always make these counter arguments. Well, if you impose wealth taxes or inheritance taxes or corporate taxes, then everybody will shrivel up and die. The corporations will run away, people will run away. But here are ways. Both Thomas Piketty and Lars Osberg and what's their name? Sorry, Tom Mallison. They basically come up with these sort of prescriptions that yes, you see, when we say, and the argument they make is this, when people say that we want to combat racism, right? And so we need to introduce anti-racism legislation. Okay, of course, it may create a backlash from some people, but just because there is a backlash, we do not argue that we should not introduce anti-racism initiatives. Rather, we say we will introduce anti-racism initiatives, and if there is a backlash, we will temper it, we will bring it down. So why is the same argument not used in the case of wealth taxes? Because right now what's happening is they say, don't put wealth taxes, firms will vote with their feet, billionaires will vote with their feet and run away. Okay, we need to basically counter that. We need to say, if they want to run away, then let's impose an exit tax, 40% exit tax. Okay, and we need to limit exemptions and deductions so that they cannot evade their taxes. We need to introduce third-party reporting. So all of us, working class people over here, whenever we get paid our income, what ends up happening? When we look at a pay stub, we always see the deductions there, CPP, EI, all those, our income already, taxes already deducted from our income before it comes to us. Similarly, the same principle should be applied to the top 1%. So whenever they make wealth, all the banks, we should have a contract with all, the government should have the contract with all the banks to reveal the names of all the people and all the companies who have their accounts there. And we can have these international treaties with Bahamas and Luxembourg and Cayman Islands, Switzerland. United States has moved in that direction. Okay, and so that third-party reporting, as we move ahead in time, and especially in this day and age of technology and AI and whatnot, we can get that information and make the tax system, make the wealth taxes very, very effective to implement. So these are, so instead of saying don't tax, they will run away, we need to make the system stronger. That's the argument of Thomas Piketty. That's the argument of Tom Malison. That's the argument of Lars Osberg. And so I'm going to leave you with the last slide over here. What do you guys see in this slide? Where is this from?
Aladdin.
Aladdin, there you go. And what do we see in this picture? Who is she and who is he? You get the idea, right? She's a princess and he's a working class, whatever you want to call him, pauper, princess on the pauper. So if we can, so the idea or our goal is to move towards a society where these inequalities are basically, we get rid of them and we bring everyone on a level playing field. And for that, we need government intervention and right. And so this was one way through which we can tackle the second most important economic issue of our times through the wonderful world of Disney, as opposed to equations and graphs which are elitist in nature and which basically do not add anything of any value in terms of understanding the crucial issues of our times. So I'm going to stop here, and if you have any questions, this is your time. Thank you very much.
I liked how you related it to how you use Disney to talk about it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I have no questions. So
No questions? All right. So Sean, Chelsea, Hitomi, Michael, okay. Sean, Michelle, Christian, MJ. Any questions? I'm here.
I'm stopping.
All right. Thank you, Hitomi. Thank you, Michael. Okay. All right. If you have no questions, this session is then complete. Feel free to explore other sessions then. Okay. Thank you, Michelle. Working class people involved. Yeah, that's a very good question, Celsi. Like, how do we get the working class people involved? We need to continue pushing. I've written 2 articles for the conversation. Basically, what I have been doing, I've been pushing the government here in Alberta. I've been telling them that whenever you create these panels on, let me see if I can find it for you. I can find it for you right now. The conversation. Okay, and just give me a second. I'm getting right over there. Articles and Alberta minimum wage. I'll share this link with you over here in the message over here. Now, this is an article where I called up the Alberta government. I said, you created a whole panel studying minimum wage, and you did not even include a single voice from the labor unions, right? So we need to continue pushing wherever we are. I'm an academic. I continue pushing as an academic. Whatever role you are in, whether you're a teacher, whether you are a member of a union, we need to keep pushing for our voices to be heard. Because if we do not push, other people will talk on our behalf. We need to send a strong message out there that these people, these top consultants, they do not speak for us. And that's all I can say over here. Yeah. How about John Powell ideas around targeted universalism as transitional towards building systems and structures that are more fully fair? Absolutely. I'm not really familiar with John Powell, Michael, but whatever strategy takes us towards more inclusivity, more justice, more equity and fairness, we should be supportive of all such endeavors as academics, as union members, as civil society representatives of various organizations. Absolutely.